Hi there, my name is Fiona, and this is one half of my colleague Julia's brain, and we together are here to tell you that your brain predicts the world. You believe that what you sense in the world is the real world, that you can see and hear, touch, smell, and taste your reality. But that is not true. Your brain is a big, fat liar, okay? And why would that be? Well, your brain is trying all the time to save itself energy. And how do brains save energy? They predict the world. Okay, so I'm not saying that we're all psychic, sadly, would be a fun power to have. What I'm saying is that your brain constantly looks to what it expects coming in the sensory world, and then it compares that to what it actually gets in the real world, okay? And why would a brain do this? Well, it's economical, okay? It saves a lot of energy because it means the brain only has to react to what it cannot predict in the environment. Lots and lots of things in your environment and your day-to-day life are really, really predictable, and they sort of co-occur together as well. One thing will almost always lead to another. You know, when you walk into your front door, for example, you will see your hallway or your dog or your spouse, and that's probably always going to happen. So, what your brain does is it makes a prediction, and those are weighted by their sensory probability, by how likely it is they're going to happen. My lab uses V1 as the candidate for this system, and we just call it V1 because neuroscientists have no imagination whatsoever, okay? So V1 is the earliest visual brain area, and it literally has a map of everything that you can see printed on it. So if we present a line over here, we would expect a line right here in Julia's early visual cortex. That's the way your brain would react. So if it is true that our brain takes in exactly what is out there in the real world, then what's printed on V1 should exactly match the real world. But we know that isn't true. And we know that V1 gets information from a lot of other brain areas. And some of what these brain areas are passing to it are predictions about the world. Okay, so the first thing I want you to do is I want you to watch this video carefully, and I want you to watch for how the car passes behind the trees, okay? Okay, I'm really sorry about that. So, we know that none of your brains, or most of your brains, didn't predict that would happen, okay? And because they didn't predict that would happen, what you get is a big increase in the activation in V1, and that's the sign of unpredictability. Something non-predictable has happened in your environment, so more energy is needed in the brain, because it needs to be included as a possibility for your future. And that's why things being predictable saves you energy, because you don't have to react in the same way to them. So when you were watching this video, you wouldn't have noticed it, but actually even before the zombie appeared, your brain was already reacting to that unpredictability. And the reason for that is that the car was late as it was coming out from behind the trees. You'd predicted when it should reappear, and it already had not reappeared. And we use stimuli, much more boring stimuli like this, to look at exactly that in the lab. So what they do is they show a scene and then either the correct continuation of the scene or the non-correct continuation. And you get higher response in visual brain areas if it's not the correct continuation of a scene. Okay, so that's the first thing our lab does. The second thing our lab looks at is what happens when early visual cortex, V1, doesn't have enough information. How do predictions influence that? So, we give subjects only 3/4 of a scene. Now, if V1, if your brain in general, only reacted to what was actually in your environment, you should see that this little bit is blank in visual cortex. As I said, V1 should only react to what is there. It should have a nice map on it. But that is not what happens. Instead, what you get, early visual cortex, predictions in the brain start filling in that empty space with what they expect to see. So with other information about that scene, your brain starts filling in what should be in the gap, okay? And we know that this works even across your senses. So if you could close your eyes for me now and just listen. So, if you obeyed my instructions and had your eyes closed, I just cut your brain off from all of your visual information, okay? But I had left it with a sensory playground in the form of auditory information, very rich and lots of it. So again, if your brain only reflected what the world was actually showing it, there's nothing in the form of vision. So visual cortex, V1, should be showing nothing. But that's not what happens. What happens instead is that your brain predicts that when it opens its eyes, it will be seeing a forest environment. And in turn, it starts to fill in the lines of the trunks of the trees and those leafy green treetops, as if you really would open your eyes and see a luscious forest in front of you, as if its predictions were going to actually occur. And then the other thing that our lab looks at a lot is visual illusions. So visual illusions are a really, really nice example of when predictions in the brain can take your brain so far as for it to ignore actual reality. So predictions can be strong enough that they change your actual reality and what you see because of that. So this one here, if you keep your eyes on the cross to the left of the screen, some people see those two flickering targets start to seem like an object in motion, bouncing between these 2 points. And again, all we ever present to V1, to early visual cortex, is just 2 targets. Again, if your brain was reacting only to what is really there in the world, it should only be representing those two points. However, other areas in the brain talk to V1, and they tell it what they are seeing is an object in motion. And in turn, there's a prediction that that object has to move down that line through the center of your vision. And then V1 activates right down that line as if something really was bouncing up and down in your vision. So this here is another nice example of that. You have one giraffe at the front that appears quite normal, and then a giraffe at the back that appears to be some kind of giraffe monster or terror giraffe. And that's because the depth cues in your environment tell you that's the case. And again, if your brain only reacted to what is in the real world, it should be putting these as exactly the same in the brain, because they're exactly the same size on the eye. However, again, that's not the case. There's a part of your brain saying, oh my God, there's some kind of colossal giraffe in the background, it will crush you. And in turn, V1 is giving that back giraffe a ton more space in the brain than the front giraffe. Sorry, got a sticky mouth for a second there. Okay, so these predictions are so strong that they even influence your interactions with other people. So when you listen to someone talking, you are not just listening to them. Your brain is constantly predicting what they're going to say. It's constantly updating that prediction when it's either wrong or right, when it could or could not predict what they were going to say. And most importantly, as we can show with illusions, it's actually strong enough to change what you hear based on what it predicts will happen. So when your brain is passing on speech to you, it's not passing on the original message, it's passing on the message with its own interpretation. So this concept that your brain predicts the world doesn't just apply to vision, it applies to every sense you have, and therefore to every perception, everything in the world that you will ever see, hear, feel, or touch. And that means that your whole brain is a prediction machine, and it defines your entire human existence.